Iran invested almost 47 years, nearly half a century, into building what they considered a capable air force. It was never designed to compete with global superpowers like the United States or Israel. The goal was modest: maintain limited pockets of air superiority over Iranian territory, just enough to complicate or deter any large-scale invasion or airstrikes. Tehran believed this aging fleet could at least buy time or create deterrence. That illusion shattered in less than 24 hours. On February 28, 2026, the United States launched Operation Epic Fury, closely coordinated with Israel's Operation Roaring Lion. In a devastating, synchronized campaign, they completely erased Iran's air force from existence. Not damaged, not grounded temporarily, gone, evaporated, turned into smoking wreckage on runways nationwide. Any Iranian pilot considering a takeoff now faces certain death. The skies belong entirely to the coalition. Iran has no realistic aerial options left. The visual evidence is undeniable. Videos released by US Central Command and shared by analysts like Max Afterburner show the destruction in real time. Take one example. A lone Iranian fighter jet sits unprotected on an open airfield. No hardened shelter, no rapid scramble. Within seconds, a precision-guided munition strikes. The aircraft disappears in a bright orange fireball, debris scattering across the tarmac. This exact scene repeated at base after base: Tabriz in northwest Iran, Konarak Naval Air Station in the south, Zahedan in the east, and many others. Iranian planes were destroyed before pilots could even reach the cockpits. No aircraft has gotten airborne since the campaign began. Afterburner, who has closely tracked these operations, described it this way: "They've completely dismantled Iran's air force. Bases like Tabriz have been hit multiple times. We're seeing F-4 Phantoms reduced to scrap metal, Su-22 ground attack jets vaporized on the spot. F-14 Tomcats, aircraft Iran refused to retire for decades, now burning hulks. F-5 Tigers, drone launch sites, everything taken out before engines could even warm up. At this moment, literally nothing is getting off the ground in Iran." Israel's military separately confirmed similar strikes at Tabriz. An F-4 Phantom and an F-5 Tiger were destroyed while ground crews frantically prepared them for emergency takeoff. These pilots were willing to attempt desperate, almost certainly suicidal intercept missions against overwhelming US and Israeli fighters. They never made it into the air. The strikes were not limited to the aircraft themselves. The coalition methodically destroyed the entire infrastructure that sustains an air force. Fuel and ammunition storage bunkers at Konarak were obliterated. Advanced radar installations at Zahedan were shattered beyond repair. These were deliberate, sequenced attacks designed to prevent Iran from generating even a single combat sortie from the very beginning. These jets were already obsolete by today's standards. Designs from the 1970s and 1980s kept flying through sheer ingenuity and cannibalization under heavy sanctions. For Iran, however, they represented the best available. F-4 Phantoms, iconic F-14 Tomcats, famous from movies but now technologically ancient, F-5 Tigers, plus a small number of Soviet-era MiG-29s and Su-24 bombers. The joint US-Israeli campaign achieved total air superiority in record time. General Dane Kane, chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, stated publicly, "The United States followed Israel's lead in these initial strikes. We have now established local air superiority over key areas. This protects our forces, both on the ground and in the air, and enables us to conduct continued decisive operations throughout Iranian territory." Securing air superiority required destroying not just planes, but Iran's entire air defense network in parallel. In the first 4 days of the conflict, Iran launched 0 manned fighter sorties, not a single one. The reason is simple: putting an outdated jet into the sky against modern US platforms, F-15 Strike Eagles, F-16 Fighting Falcons, F/A-18 Super Hornets, or stealth F-35 Lightning IIs is not a fight, it's suicide. Afterburner explained, "Iranian fighter pilots fully understand that going up against these platforms is suicidal. The technological and capability gap is simply too vast to overcome." In the opening 24-hour wave alone, Iran's pre-war fleet of approximately 400 aircraft was reduced by half, down to roughly 200 survivors. Those remaining are the weakest, poorly maintained, part-starved relics that were barely kept operational through desperate measures. None of this was accidental or improvised. According to detailed reporting from Business Insider, the campaign opened with a sophisticated layer of non-kinetic effects, large-scale cyber attacks, space domain electronic jamming, communications disruption, and intelligence blinding. Iran's command and control systems were paralyzed, radars went dark, and decision-makers were left confused and blind before the first bomb fell. When kinetic strikes finally arrived, missiles and guided bombs from fighters and bombers, half the Air Force was already destroyed on the ground, air defenses were offline, and remarkably, not a single US or Israeli aircraft was lost in those critical first hours. US Secretary of State Marco Rubio summarized the strategy. "We went in proactively, but in a defensive posture, and let me be very clear, the hardest hits from the US military are still yet to come." President Donald Trump was characteristically blunt. Iran's air defenses are gone, their navy is gone, their air force is gone, their missile capability is diminishing rapidly. Operational proof of the collapse, the US has shifted to flying non-stealth B-1 Lancer bombers deep into Iranian airspace, aircraft that would normally be highly vulnerable to long-range surface-to-air missiles, SAMs. Their safe operations demonstrate that Iran's SAM network is effectively shattered in major corridors. Iran's air defenses failed catastrophically for multiple reasons. The prelude involved electromagnetic jamming and cyber operations that took radars offline across the country. Then came the kinetic phase. The US targeted dedicated air defense batteries, command centers, and logistics nodes. Israel focused on ballistic missile launchers and key leadership targets. The Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, or IRGC, had air defense systems on paper, perhaps around 100, but suffered from severe missile shortages. Even worse, most were reverse-engineered copies or low-quality knockoffs. The Bavar 373 is a budget imitation of the Russian S-300. The Yazoo copies China's HQ-7. Against elite Western air power, they stood no chance. Afterburner added a note of realism. "We have achieved air superiority, but it's not yet absolute. A handful of SAM systems remain hidden, mobile launchers or concealed sites. They could still pop up and attempt a launch. We must stay vigilant." Nevertheless, those surviving systems were completely ineffective against the initial 24-hour blitz that gutted Iran's air force. The deeper structural reason for the collapse: Iran's air arm was hopelessly outmatched from the outset. Its best inventory included roughly 65 F-4 Phantoms, 41 F-14 Tomcats, 35 F-5 Tigers, and scattered MiG-29s and Su-24s. No airborne early warning aircraft, no modern fighters. Decades of sanctions made maintenance nearly impossible. Accidents were frequent, spare parts non-existent. Even ejector seats failed on the ground, killing pilots before combat began. Pre-war estimates showed only 50 to 60% of the fleet was flyable, with many aircraft cannibalized just to keep a few operational. This was never going to be a fair fight. It was the equivalent of Mike Tyson stepping into the ring against an unarmed elderly man. With manned aviation eliminated, Iran has shifted to unmanned drones, hundreds launched toward US bases and Gulf allies. Drones are cheap and expendable, but production facilities, storage sites, and launch areas are now under heavy, sustained attack by US and Israeli forces. Sanctions already limit Iran's ability to replace losses quickly. In a prolonged war of attrition, the US can scale up its own drone and interceptor production far more effectively and sustainably. Iran continues to issue threats, promising retaliation against European countries if they join the coalition. Those statements now ring increasingly hollow and desperate. Trump dismissed early attempts at negotiation. "They want to talk? I told them too late." Yet reports indicate a meeting is scheduled for March 8th, possibly involving surrender terms or de-escalation discussions. In just 24 hours, Iran lost complete control of its airspace. Its air force never managed to get airborne in combat. This is what total aerial domination looks like. Meticulously planned, technologically overwhelming, ruthlessly executed, and devastatingly effective.